I'm really glad to be back in Poland. This is my first time in the southwestern part of Poland. It's a very interesting city. How many of you are from Katowice? Wow, not many of you. How many is also your first time to Katowice? Awesome. Yeah, apparently this is like the new and happening food capital of Poland. Who knew? So I hope you guys have been getting out to have some of the great food in this town, because it is really interesting, especially the ice cream. You should definitely have some ice cream before you leave. We are going to be talking about how the CTO has a role of being a guardian of culture, and not just the CTO, but managers, like anyone in an engineering role needs to be paying attention to culture in your company. Why am I giving this talk? Well, I've been a CTO for about 10 years now. Before that, I was at companies like Evernote. I was one of the founding employees there. I've been a game designer. I've worked at NASA. And I've had a lot of, I've been an engineer most of my life, whether professionally or personally. I think a lot of you have had that kind of experience. Like I got my first computer at 8 years old, back when that was very uncommon. And I've won a lot of awards for the things that I do. I even have a column on Inc. magazine. I have a couple of books. So these are, like, I am somebody that really cares deeply about culture and product design from a CTO perspective. So hopefully you will find value in what I say. So I'm going to start. There are a lot of quotes about culture and how that relates to an organization. But I think this one is really, it really sums things up. And that culture is the glue that holds an organization together. And it doesn't matter how you do it, but if you actually, like, whatever your culture is at a company, that's how you get things done. My friend Tony Shea at Zappos, he likes to say that whether you know what it is or not, whether you've defined it or not, you have a company culture. Hopefully it's one that you like. So if you've defined this culture, great, because then you can be directive about it. Then you can actually define things and you can help the way the organization is going. If you haven't sat down and actually decided what you want your culture to be, then it may be too late because the ship's sailed. So that's the thing. It's the difference between success and failure if you know what your culture is going to be. And as to go with that, there's 3 types of employees. So you've got engaged employees who, they work with passion. If you're engaged, then you care about what you do. And these people are ones that actually go to work every day and they want to make their organization the best that it can. They want to make they care about their job, they're passionate. And not engaged people are just checked out. They show up, they do things by the numbers. And then actively disengaged people are people that are actively working against the company. These are people that not only don't like their job, they don't like the company, and they will not stop doing anything they can to hurt the company. So when you've got a company that has, most companies look like the one on the right. Most companies have 30% of their employees being engaged, and 50% are not engaged. And then you've got, even though it's only a small percentage, you've got 20% of your people that are actively disengaged. That's a lot of people that are actively working against the culture of your company. Now, if you've got a world-class company, one that's like top of the charts, that's actually getting stuff done, it's a company that you want to be working for. Hopefully some of us are working for a company like that. You've got 63% of the employees are engaged. They're wanting to come to work every day. They're helping the organization with its outcomes. They're helping with its goals. And only a few of them, like 30% now, are not engaged. And a very, very small percentage are actively disengaged. And those people are usually found quickly and on the way out. So they aren't hurting the company very much. But still, most of us are not happy about where we are. Like in general, most of us aren't passionate about our jobs. Like our job isn't what we want to be doing all day. We want to be at home watching Game of Thrones, or we want to be going surfing, or something that is not work. As a manager or as a CTO, what I want is to make sure that the people that I have working with me, not for me, working with me and not against me, are engaged. Because if they're happier, then my job is easier, because I get better performance out of them with little effort from me, because they're motivated to get the work done, and that raises the profits for the company, which is ultimately what the job of a CTO is to do, to deliver on time, and as a manager too, to deliver your results on time with as little friction as possible. So if you've got a vision and a mission for your company, if you've got products to deliver, then the culture of the company, the values of the company is what will get you to do it. Because it's going to motivate your employees to do it. It's going to get you there. So core values are what your employees, are what the organization is passionate about. So how are they defined? Okay. So most of you, so who has a company that has core values? Okay. Who of them knows what your core values are? That's good. Well, for most companies that have core values, they throw words up on a wall, and then that's it, and they think they're done. And it ends up looking something like this. It's like a word jumble of, like, be respectful, have integrity, and be compassion. That doesn't even make sense. How do you do these things? I don't know. And this is actually the core values chart of a company that is one of my friends, and they're a very popular consultancy. It is a dartboard that they throw a dart at for what they want to feel like that day. How is that a core value statement? I don't understand what you could do. Like, why is this useful for any employee? So if you have bad core values, your employees are going to work against each other. They're going to be actively disengaged. And they're not even doing this on purpose, because they're going to interpret what be compassion means to them. And it's not necessarily going to be the same as what somebody else thinks. They're not held accountable to these values because they're just stuck on the wall, so nobody's there. Maybe somebody in HR every 3 months is going to give them a 360 on this, but nobody is being held accountable to any of it. People feel that their work is pointless. How many feel like that? That they're doing something and they don't know what they're doing it for. And they work against the company's interests, because you feel like there's these things that you're being told to do, and you have no idea why you're supposed to do it, and then you get told something else to do, and none of it works. But then you're so disengaged from all of these other things that you just don't even bother to ask any questions to clarify whether you should be doing it or not. So all of these things end up into putting most employees into the disengaged or the actively disengaged category, even if you're in a company with core values. If you have core values, the point is to have it at the center. They're called core values because they should be at the core of your company. They should be at the center of everything you do, including development. So when you have even a nebulous core value like be compassion, you should create a product through that value. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So here again is the cycle of how core values work in a company, in a product design stage. So first, you would have a strategic plan. And when you're thinking through planning with core values as a guide, then you have to understand that, like, from the very beginning, you're creating a mission around certain values. So a value set that your entire company is going to live by. Then you create your initiatives. Now, these initiatives could be creating products. These initiatives could be a marketing thing. These initiatives could actually just be something internal in your company where you're like, hey, we think we should have vacation days for your employees. Whatever that is, it needs to be run through the core values. Then you create accountability. Somebody or some process needs to check up on that. So for example, with DevOps, we're using continuous integration, right? We're deploying things and then we have something double check it, right? So why not create more processes like that so that when we create one thing, we're double checking it? It's simple. And then last, we're evaluating over time to make sure that these things work. These are processes that we already understand, that we're using in DevOps all the time, but we're not running them through our values. So when you are using this in a DevOps cycle, all you need to do is think about it this way. Your values need to represent the culture of your organization as a whole. So if you think about your company and you look at what the actual culture is and what your ideal culture is, what are the values that are there? And that is something that may take some time. Like if you don't currently have core values at your company, then you'll need to have this exercise through, but you can probably understand maybe, you can probably come up with a few core values to live by, at least in your own department, if you don't have core values for your company. Then you need to communicate them publicly somehow. So a lot of companies, what they'll do once they have these is they put them on their website, they put them on the wall so that people can see them, or they do something so that people understand what the core values are. For example, just do it. Whose is that? Nike. So that's a core value of Nike. We all know that one. We can feel it when we see a Nike product. Like we know that they just want us to, whatever it is, just do it. No matter how hard, these values must be kept accountable. Going back to Nike for a second, last year, they were the first company to release a hijab for women in sports. Like no other company in the world had released any kind of sportswear for Muslim women. And that caused them a lot of flack. Like there were a lot of people that were not happy that they did that. And yet, they still just do it. And what that did was, it was so in line with their core values that it raised their stock price. Even though there were a lot of people that had a lot of sentiment against them, it raised their stock price because it was very much in line with their values. Values must become a part of the life's blood of an organization. Everyone in the company needs to know what those values are. They need to be able to speak them, to say them, to live them, to understand them. And so things like this, these are just a quick example of some of the top companies' core values. Now, when you're thinking about values in relation to experience and product design, a user experience isn't just about like a fancy interface. You're creating any experience through some kind of device. So both of these are user experiences that were created from core values. For example, on the left, for Climb Everest, they had a value of get people to the top of Everest. Like get people there safely, and that created the best route. On the other one, it's a hotel. It's actually Novotel. And their value is get a good night's sleep. So they're creating rooms to allow people to have the best night's sleep. So whether it's, no matter what it is, you have to make sure that the company's values are evident in what you're designing, and it doesn't have to be an app. A lot of us get stuck in thinking that all products need to be software. But those of us that do hardware also know that those things can have many other components as well. So what does that look like in practice? So now we're going to go through some examples of companies that are doing things right and companies that are doing things not so right. So Google, one of their core values is it's best to do one thing really, really well. So when you go to Google's homepage, this is what you see. It's clean. It is easy. So the one thing that they do really, really well is search. If you want to find something, not only can you just type it in and hit the search button, they even give you the option of not having to search at all. You can hit I'm feeling lucky, or you can talk into it, or you can even load an image right in there. Like their one thing that they do really, really well is to help people find their answer. And even though there's other things that Google does, a lot of other things that Google does, the main thing is to help people find answers. Rackspace. A lot of us probably use Rackspace. They're awesome. And their main core value is results first, substance over flash. I ran this ping test and combined it to Amazon. Results first, substance over flash. They are 4 to 5 times faster than AWS. They're not flashy, they're just good. And they're consistent. So, no matter what you are trying to do, they write faster, and their uptime is just as good, if not better, than most people. So, living their core values, they're not flashy. It's not a UI that you're looking at and it's all beautiful. HP. We are the technology company that invents the useful and the significant. They do so much. Again, they're not necessarily flashy, but I bet you, at least everyone in this room probably has some kind of HP thing or has owned at least one HP product in their life, because they are useful. And all of these products are significant in some way. HP has changed the landscape of the way we work in the world. IBM, innovation that matters for our company and the world. That's a hardcore value to live up to every day, right? If you go into work and you're like, wow, innovation that matters for not just for our company, but for the world, I kind of want to work there. That's awesome to feel that every day and be surrounded by people that are really believing into that. And they create stuff like that. Watson's a really fun thing to play around with. And he can beat Ken Jennings on Jeopardy. So Watson is one of the best AIs to play around with, because you can feed it any kind of data and it just learns and learns and learns, and now it is better than humans at answering things. If anyone that was in Matthew Renzi's presentation earlier today saw Cortana try to answer a question, and it got messed up with accents, but Watson does not, so try just using IBM's APIs for that. Twitter. Reach every person on the planet. Who here uses Twitter? Does it reach every person on the planet, you think? Maybe not China, but... Well, I mean, here's analytics data. Not only do they do that, not only do they have the capability of reaching everyone on the planet, but they are open about your reach. They show you how far it's going. This is it's hard to read, but this is Nike's. So they're showing just in 1 month, like how many followers they have, how much reach it's gone, and like they have only about probably 1/10 of the people on the planet right now, but they're still going. They're growing. Jack Dorsey's working on it. Buffer, live smarter, not harder. Buffer is a company that makes it easier to post on social media. And I mean, if you have a bunch of Facebook accounts, a bunch of Twitter accounts, or just all of the above, and you're trying to post something on multiples, you can just use one thing and it's easier. So living smarter with Buffer. Now, it's not just for apps, as I said before. You can actually do that, and it's also not just for public. You can do this internally in a company, so change the infrastructure of your company. With Dell, now this is a mouthful of a core value. Like, this is actually a core value that they have. We strive to make sure that everyone in any environment can take advantage of technology. We're constantly curious, and we never stop trying to find smarter ways to get things done. It's a mouthful, but it's pretty cool. I mean, to think that the people at Dell are always encouraging you to be curious and to try to come up with new ways to get things done. Now, thinking about a core value like that and how that would work when creating new products, or as in a DevOps context, like thinking about that, if you're trying to go through a systems analysis and say, what can I cut out, or what can I add, or what can I do to make things easier on me as a manager for my employees, save money, save time, save effort. Well, they came up with a BYOD policy that's probably the best in the industry. Other companies have been following the Dell BYOD policy, bring your own device policy, since 2012. Like, they have a whole system of a framework that you can use to help your company adopt this. They have this portal, they have packets, they explain everything of what you need, because what they realized was it was way easier to allow people to bring their own hardware that they'd already chosen and install extra VPNs and things on that, even though now they have to have Casper and other things installed on people's devices. It makes it much easier than having to have a central purchasing system, and then people are going to have 2 different cell phones and 2 different computers and things like that. So it makes it easier on their employees, and they're more engaged. A company called Zirtual has a core value of beautifully simple. From a DevOps standpoint, again, how do you do that internally? I mean, it's easy if you're a product manager and you're creating software that's beautifully simple. What do? Flat UI, something like that. You know, you have as few buttons as possible in a minimal form. But when you're trying to think about your employees, we're the ones that usually get the slack, right? Like we have to fill out all this paperwork and do all sorts of stuff because we're employees, right? Nobody cares about the back end. Well, at Zirtual, what they did was they gave everybody Chromebooks. You can't possibly have a lot of paperwork on a Chromebook. Everything's done through Google, because they figured, well, we don't have to install Microsoft Office or anything like that. We can do everything through Google Sheets and Gmail and everything like that. And then when people leave the company, there's nothing to uninstall. And it's really inexpensive. So from a DevOps perspective, it's super automated. So what if this fails? Like, what if you don't live your core values? Apple actually has a core value of we don't settle for anything less than excellence in every group in the company. And we have the self-honesty to admit when we're wrong and the courage to change. I'm sure you could have many, many examples that you can think of right off the top of your head where this is, but my favorite example of where Apple has not led up to this is Apple Maps. You could just probably open up your Apple Map right now and try and pick somewhere. But there's times when it's tried to tell you to turn into the water to get to an island. And in Big Ben, it has different times on every side of the clock. There's so many versions of this kind of thing. And in the center of this square, it looks like a bomb hit it. So, yes, of course, things like this happen in Google too, but it just happens much more frequently with Apple. And to be fair, Apple does a lot of great things, and they are excellent in most of their products. But the problem here is Apple takes a long time to admit when they do something wrong, if they do at all. Recently, did anyone fall prey to the FaceTime bug? So recently what Apple had was a bug where if you called somebody on FaceTime but they didn't pick up, your phone actually still connected and you could see what was happening and hear what was happening on the other person's phone. This was up for about 6 weeks until a security researcher said, hey, I reported this. Apple hasn't mentioned it, so I'm just going to tell the entire world that you can do this. And then within 24 hours of it becoming public, Apple released a security patch because apparently there were some news people that were caught in the bathroom. But that's the thing. If a company has a core value of being open, honest, and admitting they're wrong, and they don't live up to it, then they're not living their value. Facebook, be open. Now, so this is what they mean by being open. They allow you to access all of your settings. They let you see where things are posted. They let you see where you've been tagged. They let you see the terms and conditions. Obviously, they have a very different explanation of be open than what most people do. If anyone saw Mark Zuckerberg at the congressional hearings in the United States, he was not exactly be open. So we will let them say that it was a matter of misunderstanding of what their core value was for a minute. But I'm going to put this one in they're not living up to it. Because if the customers don't understand it inherently, then they're not living up to their value. And another one that I unfortunately was part of, Evernote. Your data is protected. So Evernote has 3 core values, just 3. They're very easy. Your data is private, your data is protected, and your data is portable. And then in May 2012, we had a security breach. Well, we lived up to one of them. Your data is portable. Unfortunately, it was portable to the wrong person. So this actually, because we were a company, Evernote at its heart was formed by security people. All of us, our previous company was a security company. We worked for the government. And so 2 of our core values were very strong in security. And so all of the company, it was built in. We were very strongly living our values. And when we inevitably did have a security breach, because everyone has a security breach at some point in time. Anyone that tries to say that you're not going to is lying. This is going to happen to you. Especially DevOps people, you should know that you're going to have an incursion at some point. It's going to happen. But when this did happen to us, it struck the entire company very, very hard. And what happened was, I mean, we were very prepared for it, but it still struck us through the heart. However, we were stronger after it because our core values were about security. So how do you put all of these things into practice? How do you create products that are around your core values? Well, first, you actually have to have core values. You actually have to bring your people together to, it actually kind of looks like this. Everyone in the company like throws the things that they think your core values are on the wall, and then you cluster them together until you figure out what that is. And you also have to understand what your user experiences that you want to create are. And there's a lot of sticky notes that get used in these processes. Then you understand what your user journey is that you're trying to create. So in the example of Novotel, like how do you create a room that's going to create good sleep? Well, blackout curtains are a good thing, right? And a quick check-in for people would be great, and comfortable beds, and all of these things. And all of this experience, white noise generators in a room, like thinking all of the things that you need to do for the experience to create the right thing, to go through that value. You run it through the values. Will this help? Will this help the value? Will this help the value? Then at the end, you have something that's even more of a systems map. It just keeps getting more and more complex as you go on. And then you map it out. So each thing becomes a sketch along the way that you are breaking down into kind of like a storyboard. And every single one of those has a task that you're engaging everyone in your company, and each one can go through the core value. So, for example, using voice recognition to determine when a task is complete. Like, that's something that somebody can actually do. They know when it's done, and you can assign that to somebody. It's a visual storyboard that makes more sense to people than Asana. This is a UI for that, because in my company, having just text doesn't make any sense. Nobody knows what it means, and this works it out. So you start out, again, just write down the task, then map it out. We all know how to do this kind of thing. And then you have your mock-ups. And overall, it's just like creating these vision-based software experiences is just a combination of like understanding the behavioral psychology and creating a UX around that, knowing what your core values and your culture is that you want to have, not necessarily the one that you do have, but your ideal one. And then using the engineering skills and the design skills that you have to create that. It's really simple. So in order to do that, ensure that you have a clearly communicated set of core values. If your company doesn't have one, create one for your department. And then make sure that you all are on the same page with what these are. Then filter the values through all aspects of your design process. Everything you do, does it make sense for the values? If it doesn't, cut it out. Then lead your organization into a culture of constant innovation. Now, this is how people stay engaged. If you're at a company where you're not innovating, then it's boring. Unless you like going to work and not doing anything all the time, which some people do. I mean, it's a paycheck, right? And paychecks are good. But if your job is basically just hitting a key all the time, then you get bored and you fall asleep and you blow up the power plant. It's not a great thing. So then you just need to maintain that accountability. And I don't mean with peer programming, because we all hate that, right? Peer programming is awful. But no matter how hard it is, You need to maintain some kind of accountability to what you are creating. My friend Tony Shea again, he's kind of like the god of core values. He created a company called Zappos and wrote a great book called Delivering Happiness, which this is a quote from. And he says, the best way to build a brand for the long term is culture. And everything we're doing at a company is towards building a brand. Like all of this has to do with a brand. And if we think that just by being DevOps people, we're just in the back room and nobody cares, well, talk to me about the Evernote breach, and I can tell you a lot of people care about what we do in DevOps. So it is a huge, huge investment to spend time in core values, because if you do care about these things, then you will create beautiful products, beautiful experiences that your employees and your customers will care about for a long time. And it'll make you want to go to work and be happy about that, and not just be thinking about what time is Game of Thrones coming on. So I have time for some Q&A, and I wanted to thank you all for coming today.